Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the DS Show. I'm joined by a very special guest today. She is an experienced clinical operations professional with many years of experience in the field. She currently is a senior operations consultant. Please welcome to the show, Ghazala Kabani.
Thank you, Danish. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's always great to speak with folks who are in the industries and kind of on the ground level, and it's always great to kind of hear from them what's happening in their world. So, before we jump in, I think it'd be great if you can introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Danish. This is a great idea. And I'm listening to some of the past recordings. I'm really honored to be a guest on your show. In terms of my introduction, uh, I'll give you some information about my educational background and my experience. I'm currently a consultant. I have my own company, consulting company, Integrity ClinOps Consulting. And I'm the founder, and I'm doing that for last 2+ years as a consultant. And I'll talk about it in a little bit why I moved to a consulting role. My education background is I was trained in Pakistan as a nurse. I was a community health nurse. I completed my bachelor's degree. I'm a midwife by training. Moved to US to complete my master's in public health, specifically health policy management from Johns Hopkins University. And after that, I joined Harvard University to do a 1 year postdoctorate fellowship program doing advanced research looking at health equity indicators.
Mm,
After completing that, I became a nurse in Wisconsin and worked as a telemedicine nurse. And by accident, found my footing in, or myself into the role in clinical trials. So it's not something I knew about so much. And in the US is how it's done, that it is a whole different profession and a whole different set of challenges and rules that govern clinical operations industry. So I moved within Wisconsin into site management um, in clinical trials. That was I went there just for a short time to see what it is like to be in that pharmaceutical side. And here I am 25 years later talking about my journey
wow,
into clinical operations. So, and it's been great. It's been wonderful. I have I've been lucky to work in all different sites of pharmaceutical industry. So I have worked at a study site like hospitals and clinics and managing clinical study coordinators, worked with CRO, which we will might talk about during our conversation. CROs are
mhm,
contract research organizations. I worked as a monitor who travel and review clinical trials data in hospitals and clinics. I
mm,
worked with in management roles and then moved into biotech and pharma industry. So I was lucky and I am lucky to have this both all sides of these experiences because it gives me empathy and a better understanding of what my clients need as a consultant. 2.5
mm,
years ago, um, I've been thinking about moving into consultancy or as a consultant role for a long time and finally had courage to jump into it. Um, and I thought I will try it out and see how I feel being a consultant. And I'm really enjoying doing it. And now I have clients in biotech, pharma, and CRO side. So
that's
I'm
great.
still working with different partners at this time.
Okay, there's something you mentioned early on. You mentioned by accident you landed in this space. What can you tell us a little bit more how what that was like? What was that moment, that first breakthrough like?
Yeah, so I, as I said, and we might want to talk about a little bit for people who are trying to get into this industry and don't know where to start. Many of us, if you ask people around my experience and even junior, many of us will have the same story that we got in by accident. It's not
Mm.
something I planned while going to school. I wish I had, but I did not. When I was in Wisconsin, my supervisor said, "You have all these qualifications, and I have a position that fits your profile better than what you're currently doing as a telemedicine nurse." So, and I thought, okay, let me try this. I would move to a bigger town
Mm.
and figure things out and see how I feel. So, without knowing what it was, I accepted the role of a manager of a clinical trials program, um,
Wow.
doing vaccine trials, and pediatric trials for the main at the main clinic, and also 40 smaller sites. 35, 40 sites Marshfield Clinic had. So if they had a clinical trial at any of those sites, I would set it up and make sure staffed and conducted per regulations, per requirements, per protocol. So
Okay.
yeah, that's how I entered. And then working there for a year and a half, the second step was when then I started finding out, oh, there is more to it. It's very interesting. All these monitors who
Mhm.
travel and come to review my data and my trial and my meet with me, I could be one of them. So I asked
Mm.
those monitors, how do I get into um, in a CRO uh, or a pharmaceutical company? And they advised, and they gave me names of the companies. I put my resume online, and one of the companies, PPD, picked up my CV and asked me to come for an interview in Philadelphia, and I became a clinical trial monitor. And I kept
Wow.
finding, it's like I keep finding new opportunities throughout. So some of these things happen by accident in a way that I did not know what's expected next. It's after gaining experience, somebody discovered me and gave me opportunity to do more. A
Mm.
recruiter may have reached out to me, or a pharmaceutical company reached out to me. Most of my jobs were by a recruiter who found me versus me going actively looking for a role in the industry.
Wow. So it sounds like kind of the theme there is you kind of, well, there's multiple things. Like one is you took the chance and you went for it, right? And
Yeah,
the second is, you once you were there, you seemed to do a really nice job of networking and kind of keeping an open mind to what's possible and what's next. You may not have known before, but as soon as you got there, it was like you entered a brand new world and your horizons were kind of expanded.
absolutely. Absolutely. You described it so much better than I did. And that's exactly what happened. It is networking, keeping an open mind, and using available online tools to advertise myself by placing, at that time it was placing your resume with hot jobs. I forgot the name, but there were some like before LinkedIn, there were other ways you post your
Sure.
resumes, and then and a recruiter may just catch your resume, and if they found it interesting. And
Mhm.
what was interesting about my resume to them was that I was a nurse, and I had
Mm.
site experience, and I had other experience that I acquired. So I kept getting more and more senior, and kept getting more and more responsive, higher level responsibilities, either through promotions or through recruitment.
Okay. Now, would you say that once you're in, it's kind of much easier to sort of go in different directions? Do you think it's harder to just get that first initial jump?
Absolutely, the hardest is the first initial. Although I didn't have to encounter this because I wasn't planning to be in this industry, but
Mm.
I mentor a lot of young people, and also very experienced in, some of them have been physicians, for instance, 20, 30, 40 years. They are well-known name, but they are not getting the first clinical trial entry level job either, and they
Mm.
don't know what to do. It's so frustrating for them, and I mentor them in how to find your way in the industry. But it's not as easy it may seem. And as you said, this is people find it by accident. Somebody kind of introduce you, and they have an entry level opportunity where you go and you start and you learn. That's the most common way people find their way in
Mhm.
a pharma.
Yeah.
pharma job or biotech job or a CRO job.
Yeah. There's a saying, it's sometimes not what you know, but who you know. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there is a reason. There is a reason for that. It's not about people hiring their favorites, but it is about hiring people who have grit, who have stamina, who can withstand the pressures. It's one of the demanding fields, and I'm a nurse by training, and I've worked as a nurse. So I'm saying from that, with that experience, that you need somebody you trust, who is ethical, who has integrity. So people look for individuals. Usually, they already know, or they have very strong credentials, and they worked with strong companies and have strong background before they join the team. That's one of the reasons
Mm.
knowing somebody helps, because they know you too, and they feel confident that if I hire this person, if I hire Ghazala, or I hire Danish because I know him, or he would do really well. It's not so much about what you know; it's also about what your personality is like and your ability to learn and
Mm.
adapt. Yeah.
Yeah, so we could have talked a little bit about your story, how you first got in. Can you share a little bit what that learning journey was like? Because now you're brand new into clinical trials, right? This was your first trial, perhaps. You're on
hmm
kind of the site level. Could you share a little bit? How long did it take to learn? Just what goes into a trial? Like, what was that learning journey like for you?
I'm still learning. I have to start there. That I'm still learning. There is every day something new comes out, that or new guidance or regulation that you say, "Oh my God, now I have to train myself into this aspect." So that's the whole journey, is learning. It's all about learning. But my first job was very painful for me, because I was after getting so much education and scholarships and recognition and awards. When I went into clinical trials, my very first job 25 years ago, I did not know what I got myself into, and said, why did I take this job? There was such complex issues and complex protocols. I was responsible for a large team, a catchment area. And so I have to not only learn clinical trials and people management, but I also have to learn um, how to manage business, how to interact with people, how to work with egos,
Mm.
investigators who are also very accomplished physicians, practitioners, who are now coming into clinical trials exactly like how I was struggling to learn everything, because it's not very logical at first. For them to learn this on top of what they do every day with their patients and the patients they see. So there was a lot of learning involved for 1.5 or 2 years that I was there. Every day I was learning something new, and I was able to make, you kind of trial and error. It's truly a trial and error learning. You try this strategy, you try that strategy to make sure that everything is working. But I was lucky, I had a very good team, very experienced study coordinators who reported to me, and amazing investigators
Mm.
who were there to support me and my team. And they also helped me find things that I needed to learn to do my job well. So that's kind of like the very painful start. But then when I went to PPD to become a monitor, they had an excellent on site training program for free. I don't know if it's
Mm.
still there or it's free still, but at that time, no strings attached. You just enter. As soon as you get the job, you start. You offer. The first 2 weeks of your job was learning about clinical trials and how to be a monitor, and
Mm.
then you qualify. You have to give an exam. If you pass that
Wow.
exam, you get the job. If you don't pass the exam, all your time that you spend learning, you have to kind of go somewhere else to find the next job. So that's how
Mm.
most of the people I was with, experienced or not experienced, everyone had to go through that rigorous training, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, and it sounds like that was a great opportunity for you to kind of hone in on your craft and your kind of knowledge base and skill set.
Yeah, and the way that program was designed, the PPD program was designed, and I think that's just something that most large CROs do in some capacity, in some ways or the other. And it's a very good starting point for practitioners who are already accomplished healthcare professionals or really great in what they do. Is that once I finished the training, I had to pass the exam. So I made sure I was learning. They made sure I was learning everything they were teaching me for those very expensive training, they put us
Mm.
through. Then there is on site. They would send a colleague who trains you together, and then a supervisor, training supervisor, not your supervisor, but a trainer who comes and observe performance of the CRA. And then every year your reporting supervisor is with you on site to ensure you're doing everything that you're supposed to do. They also and they would come as they would without telling you that they will be present. The study site would know
Mm.
that it's a
Okay.
secret, but they would come and check on us, and I like that. But they were large organizations, so they can afford to do that. Smaller companies cannot, but large companies can very easily do that. So that's kind of like kept us sharp as well, because we knew somebody will come and ask questions. So we were learning not just by classroom learning, but also hands-on support and learning and trainings. And continuing education was there all the time.
Mm. Now, if we kind of segue a little bit, you've got, you said 25 years of experience within this industry. Just for the average person out there, can you share a little bit about what goes into a clinical trial and just what is the general process?
So, wow. I want to start with by saying that it takes longer to develop a drug than it took to send the first man to the moon. So I
Mm.
think it took 8 years to send somebody to the moon, but takes around 10 to 12 years to finish complete drug development. It's a journey again. Drug development is a journey. It starts with early drug discovery, moves into preclinical, which is done in lab settings. This is before my role comes in. So preclinical and drug discovery is once that's completed and that we have a viable candidate that looks promising in animal study and lab data is strong, then it moves into clinical trials. And from clinical trials, there are multiple phases of clinical trials. So that's also a process. And at every phase, we submit information, in our case, FDA in the US or a regulatory authority. So they provide oversight, but they look at the study as a whole, they give approval. There are ethics committees involved. So there is a whole process we have to follow to ensure each phase of the study is done. At the end of each phase, we have collected data, which we analyze and see if this drug is safe or it has efficacy, like it's doing what it's supposed to do in humans. And if it is promising and it meets its goals of that trial phase, it moves to the next phase. But every phase, there are so many candidates, like it's a race. So many people just cannot finish or go to the
Mm.
finish line because of the long journey and because of many, many different reasons that drugs don't make it to the next phase. Very few of them make it to the last phase three. Once phase one, two, and three is done, I'm talking just about drug because devices have a different phase structure, but very similar. Um, we submit data to the FDA if successful after phase three and get hope for the approval and the whole process goes on. So once we have approval, it's marketed and then there is a phase four. And throughout the life cycle of drug, when it's used in human, safety data is collected and information is collected throughout to reevaluate how drug is doing. Maybe it's doing better. Maybe it can work in other indications. Maybe it's not as safe as we thought when we got approval.
Mm.
So it starts from preclinical drug development, early discovery, all the way to approval and then post approval.
Mm. Now, based on your experience, I'm sure you've been through several of these now. Are there certain
Yeah.
signs that you look for within a company that you can look at and be like, okay, I think, because you never know for sure, but you think this one may do better. Are there any traits that you've seen across the ones that have been successful that you say, okay, these things I look for now when kind of looking into a trial?
So are you talking more about clinical study, a successful trial, or successful program, drug development program versus those who fail? What are the
Yeah, just
traits?
what are some
Oh,
traits,
oh,
successful ones versus those that don't make it?
oh, excuse me. I hope that my fan wasn't making too much noise. Okay.
It's okay.
So it's a very good question, and there could be many answer, and I could just give you a brief answer. It depends, but in general, a successful drug, and I'm speaking from clinical operations, and in my role, I come in after the product or investigational product is in clinical trials in humans. So this is where my role begins. I'm
Mm,
assuming by the time it comes to me, it has been successful enough to make it to phase one at least, if not before. A successful, you know, not only that the compound is promising and it had shown good results in animals, there are many factors that can impact the success of the trials or trial in humans once it enter humans. Um, the key factors are, in my opinion, is having a really sound protocol design. So the protocol is designed to measure exactly what we need to measure to see if the investigational product is doing what it's supposed to do and it's safe. Um, the other is having straightforward, as straightforward as you can build a study without adding additional good to get details, because the more complex study gets, the more not only that it gets expensive, subjects, patients who are considering or human, healthy volunteers who
mhm,
are participating in those trials are not afraid to be on in these studies because they have life and they have to do things.
mm,
Ensuring that the team who's overseeing the study understands the therapeutic area and the complexities of the clinical trials. So it is cheaper to find somebody with some experience to manage clinical studies, and it seems like, oh, I found somebody who can do this half the cost of this more experienced individual can. But with experience, you get all the insight. Somebody who can come and review the protocol and give you feedback on what might work, what might not work. Would it work in the clinic? Would it work at the site? Um, is it feasible to do in countries the sponsor has selected? Is
mm,
it regulatorily feasible? Is our regulatory strategy sound? The healthcare, the authorities that are going to review the studies, if it's a global trial like a larger study, how likely are they going to approve this study design? Do we have
mm,
sufficient money to conduct the study? Do we have a good partner, CRO partner, or the vendor who conduct these studies on our behalf? Do they have right expertise and team assigned to our study um, to conduct the study? And do we have a really good oversight? And eventually, it's about, after all this effort, it's really about data. Are we collecting quality data? Do we have oversight on how data is collected and entered into our systems? And the data that data is what's going to take us to the next phase or to the approval. So are we doing a good job in finding the right people to collect data, to review data, and analyze that data for us, and then you know
mm.
help us design the study in a way that we collect what we need to collect? I don't know if
Yeah,
that's
no,
clear,
that's
Danish.
yeah, yeah. That paints a good picture, and I think I think that's a good segue too, because wanted to chat a little bit more about CROs, because you mentioned a little bit about how they're involved in this process, and you mentioned how important data is. So, can you describe a little bit about what the role is of the CRO, and just kind of in relation to where they fit in this whole space?
So, so in terms of who is a contract research organization, and I wrote down this definition in case you asked, and thank you for asking. So I will give you the definition from FDA, but there are other definitions as well. FDA says it means CRO or contract research organization is a person that assumes as an independent contractor with the sponsor one or more obligations of the sponsor. So it could, but in broadly, it can be a person like me or a organization, a CRO, large or small, who is
Mhm.
responsible, who's for the regulatory obligations of the sponsor. So it's transferred to that organization or person in writing. This is what you're responsible. This is what the sponsor is responsible for. Um, so CROs have been they what I understand, this is before my time. In the early parts of when the clinical trials were being done, sponsors like pharmaceutical companies did their own studies, they had their own staff. But with time, it became very expensive to manage large teams, to manage
Mm.
complexities of the trials, and continue to evolve your clinical trials operations as a pharmaceutical company. So the CRO model was used where the pharmaceutical company would outsource their some or all of the clinical trial functions or majority of the functions or maybe one or two to this vendor or a person to do on their behalf. Um, and what was your other question? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just generally, like where do they fit in the space,
Oh,
right? Like,
so they fit. They it depends on the structure of the organization, but generally, I would give you more my experience. So when I'm
mhm,
working as a sponsor, the CRO comes in when I have a protocol in place, or at least a good draft protocol in place and study design in mind. I send out requests for proposals from CROs, and they submit their proposal based on my study, and then I, look for their capabilities. So I would ask them, I need data management, I need clinical trial monitors, or I need medical monitor or pharmacovigilance, or whatever services I required for to conduct my study. They would submit their bids and they will defend their
mhm,
bids. Maybe if I invite them for defending their bids, and I will select the CRO. So they usually, in my experience, they come in after the sponsor has pretty good idea of what they're doing and what their studies are about.
sure.
There might be other arrangements, whether it's strategic alliance between the CRO and the sponsor, and they're working together, and they may be involved early on during the design phase, very early on, than
Mm.
what my experience has been, where the CRO comes a little later in this game. And one of the reason is they come a little later because I work with small biotechs or
Mm.
smaller biotechs. So they cannot afford to bring a CRO on board until they know what they're doing, and they try to do so
Yeah.
much themselves before involving a
Mhm.
vendor, because these CROs contracts are very expensive and you only initiate when you're ready to initiate a CRO.
Sure. Now, earlier you mentioned the importance of data being collected as being perhaps the most critical thing that you need in order to advance forward, right? And
Mhm.
having like the right data, asking the right questions, collecting the right data, collecting it in the right way. Um, how critical is the CRO in that function at some of the smaller or medium-sized projects and companies?
Very critical. And I would start by saying that when you talk about small could be two people on board, three people on board companies, biotechs. One
Mm.
person, like they have only have CEO, and that CEO may have experience in only one aspect. So this is like their life and death
Mm.
decision, who comes to help them, whether it's an consultant like me or a whole company, a CRO coming in to help them get started. And they may have only one product. So their success of their program is critical. And the most, eventually, after we all do this, we eventually have a very, an answer whether our drug is safe, is it efficacious? And we have very few items to show. But to
Mm.
get to that final output, we submit to the FDA, or we have to see if our drug is safe and effective. We collect a lot of data. So we use a lot of systems to collect this data from clinics and hospitals. And there are many strategies used for our investigators to send their data to us. But for simplicity, I'm just thinking of a classic study where we're using an electronic data capture system. We have clinical trial done at several hospitals and clinics where these subjects who are participating in our trial are seen. We have told the site what we would like them to collect, and a patient is consented, and they said, okay, you can collect this information, you can draw blood, you can do these diagnostic procedures on me, and I give you permission and to administer this drug or placebo. So after all this hard work, this data needs to be captured in at the study site. They might handwrite it on the medical
Mm.
records. They might type it in medical records, and then they enter their data in electronic data capture system. And the sponsor role is to look at this data, ask questions, clarify through queries if the data makes sense. For instance, we ask, what is patient's temperature at this visit, or what was the blood pressure? And we know nobody can have, blood pressure of 3,000 or 2,000 or,
Mm.
like those random numbers. So our job is to make sure the data that is entered is consistent, logical,
Clean.
um, and clean. And then we provide that oversight. We also do spot checks or full check, 100% review of the data, the source, which is called source data in the hospital, like medical records, and
Mm.
see whatever
Mm.
the study site tells us about this patient, and whatever is entered is truly what they have in their systems, and is it logical, and was it collected per some guidelines. So it's a very complex process, and data quality is what can take the study to success, or at least tell us if it's not good. We know this drug doesn't work. It's if a drug doesn't work, it's not necessarily mean we have poor quality data. It is that drug
Mm.
truly doesn't work in this population. But if you don't have good data, how do you say whether it works or it doesn't work?
Yeah. So is it fair to say then, the actual drug or product aside, the next big critical thing is the CRO, because that could ultimately make or break the study?
Yeah, if you have a great product, and let's say you have a great design of your program, a CRO can make or break your study. And it has happened in my case. I have experienced it because I have worked with biotechs and small companies for a long time. And I have seen CROs do great jobs, but also seen CROs doing really poor job without accountability on those
Mm.
jobs. So um, eventually, speaking about smaller biotechs where they are not sharing risks with the CROs because they're very small and the CROs have so many requirements before they share risks with small budgets compared to larger pharmaceutical companies that have larger budgets and a huge army of people providing oversight.
Mm.
These small biotechs, if they outsource it to CRO and the CRO is not doing the right, not right by this company, maybe they didn't assign the right people, maybe they assigned the right people, but they did not train them well, or they did not provide oversight and support they need. So for many reasons, a trial can go into the not performing as well. That's the role of the sponsor, is to catch it before it fails because of human reasons, not
Mm.
because it failed due to whether it truly doesn't work. The drug doesn't work. I'm
Mm.
not talking about that.
Mm.
We provide, sponsor is responsible for, ultimately responsible for conduct of the study, but we are also responsible for providing oversight. And I come in now as a consultant to provide that support and find before issues become bigger. So if I see the
mm,
CRO's team is uncertain about the product and they don't know in depth about the study design, or they have not trained themselves well, I would make sure that the additional training is provided, additional support is provided. Sometimes I would need to escalate performance issues. Sometimes I need to escalate lack of support from the larger team to their team. They may have amazing people, but if they don't have support and they're overworked, either
mm,
they're going to quit or they're going to do an as acceptable job as they can based on how
mm,
much work they have. So my role is to also identify those red flags that are beyond data, they're beyond the product issues, but more human study management issues, CRO oversight issues. Um, as a sponsor, I also ensure that the selected vendors and I have interactions at
mm,
various levels, project manager to project manager, but also upper management, business development people who brought us this business to flag issues upfront and escalate according to the type of issue we are facing. Some issues can be resolved
mm,
talking, training, improving procedures. It's also possible the sponsor has not provided clear guidance or clear
mm,
protocol and it's causing some confusion. So then, I identify those issues and correct it on my end. And sometimes we have to go up to the chain of command and make sure that we get, as a sponsor, I get the best support. Now, I work for CRO as well, a CRO. I'm consulting for a CRO. And from the CRO point, also the CRO management's role is to identify those issues proactively, very clearly
mm,
um, identify those issues, report it to the sponsor, and ask for the appropriate support and help. And keep flagging those issues because at times sponsor team may not be as experienced or maybe very busy. So the
mm,
CROs also play a big role in identifying issues and escalating it appropriately to the sponsor side of what is needed to perform the study, conduct the study according to the
wow,
expectations. So it's a team. I'm not saying we are two warring side and it's always one
mm,
side that
mhm,
fails and the other side rescues. It's a team. It's a
sure,
partnership between the two companies or two groups. If it's only one person representing a CRO, is to work together for the success of the trial. And Danish, what is the most important thing that I have to keep in mind as a nurse and step out of my role as a clinical trial person? Eventually, it's about patients. Am I going to use this approved product that I worked on? If I have cancer, if I have this disease, or would I give it to my child, or would I give it to somebody I love? And
mm,
do I trust this data that I myself worked on? And
yeah,
also the second aspect is these are humans who give their bodies to clinical trials and they agree to participate. And what a waste if we don't do our job, and what a disservice to those who volunteered to participate in clinical trials because we did not do our job well.
so it seems like this is a very passionate
Yes,
um, thing for you, and it seems like it's based on what you were sharing. Like you mentioned, it's not just the CRO or the sponsor, right? It could be either side that may have certain lapses, and it
yes.
also seems like your role, kind of being a neutral sort of third party, right? You can be kind of more objective in your evaluation or sort of observations of what you see, and essentially you're bolstering both sides as a unit, right, to kind of coordinate
Hmm.
together for the best possible
Exactly.
outcome.
Exactly. And that's very important, is to able to see the issues without getting bogged down by personal details about it, like, why this person is not performing and finger pointing,
Hmm.
but it's more about what processes are not working. work, how can we support our teams to do the best job they can and more, and be happy doing what they're doing, feel satisfied at the end of the day, and stay with the project for in long term, because they also believe. Do they understand what we are working on? What is the goal of the program? Do they
Mm.
understand how it's going to help humanity when completed? How it's going to help patients when it's done? What diseases it's going to prevent or treat? Um, if we all understand the big picture, it is much easier to do what you're doing on a
Mm.
daily basis, because you kind of see the big picture.
And you're invested. You feel
Yeah,
invested
you are
in the.
invested,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. Now, since you've been on kind of each of these different sides, I guess, of the trial, um, what are some of the best practices you feel when a company is selecting a CRO?
Oh, wow. I can give like many talks about it. And I've been trying to, I was thinking about it because I am currently working with a client who is in the process of selecting a CRO, and it's a very nerve-wracking process. It's like selecting a CRO is like selecting a life partner. Um, you have to quote enough, you have to assess enough to make the best decision, but you have to make a decision at some point. And then you have to kind of live with that decision, at least for a while, if not forever. Um,
Mm.
so it is a it's a process, and so there are many CROs options available, and not each CRO is suitable for each type of study. So, and you are asking what is the process, or what makes.
I think a little bit of both. Like, how do you go about selecting one, and then how do you kind of filter through that list?
Yes.
What's your
So
evaluation criteria?
so one is that knowledge of the CRO. Do we know that CRO from before? Have we worked with them? Um, we start with finding the CROs with the right experience. So it's possible that the CRO I worked with in the past may not have experience in that indication. We look at our budget before going to a CRO, because when I go to a large CRO, like really big names, if I don't have the budget,
It's top
it
color.
may not be, yeah, it's just taking their time to submit a bid that I would never be able to afford. Based on my experience, I know how much they cost, but sometimes they are the best options because they may be the only ones with the right experience.
Mm.
The second part is that knowing the experience of the CRO, but also when we submit the most of the time is recommendations, past experience of the study site, for instance. Sometimes investigators tell us we worked with the CRO and they did a fabulous job.
Mm.
We really liked them. We had great experience. You have an early phase study, or it might be a good fit. So somebody can introduce us to a CRO, and we ask them to do capabilities presentation. We talk to them. We get a sense of their capabilities and strengths, and if they're then we have a whole formal process of submitting requests for proposals. When we receive those proposals, we dig deep and we see whether proposal is a cookie cutter solution they just sent, or they really thought about the study, that asked right questions. Their budget is really they put the budget together with very thoughtful budget together.
Mm.
Many times CRO selection is also influenced by decision makers like board members, upper
Mhm.
management, because they may have their own past experience working with CROs. So they might say, okay, you're doing such an important study and you're going with this little known CRO. We would like you to use this large CRO and get them, or exact CRO that we feel would be a
Mhm.
good fit. So they may recommend, and of course, if they recommend, we do look at them. And then there is a whole bid defense process. We look at their budget, but not just the budget, but their capabilities and what is their plan? have they thought about the risks? Can they manage the study? Do they have experience in this therapeutic area, or at least similar therapeutic areas? Sometimes nobody has experience in those therapeutic areas because not much is done in those indications. So, you have maybe fewer choices. And it's a very involved process. And these days, sponsors don't give 100% services to one CRO, although it happens.
Hmm.
More likely not that we have a multitude of strategies. So there are some services that we assign to a CRO with that experience. So maybe a CRO is great at data management and stats function and
Sure.
medical writing. There are central labs. We can't do it in-house, but then we can do some
Hmm.
services in-house. So we decide what services we can do in-house and how much money do we have, how much oversight we need to provide. So it also depends on where, because if I find it a mix of strategies better than fully outsourcing to a CRO, because then you are at their mercy
Hmm.
for success. You may be lucky to get a great team and they will take you to the end, but you may not. So um, if I'm doing a global trial, let's say I'm doing it in um, Asia or Europe, in Africa, and then North America, I might find local CROs there, not give everything to one big CRO, because they may not have expertise in that area. So it's a complex process. It's a lot of um, experience is required to make those decisions, and also a lot of discussions with the team and thinking about the strategy and talking to the board, and then deciding what services can be done in-house, what services can be outsourced to different vendors who may charge you less, versus going directly to one big company and giving all the business to one vendor. I don't know if I've answered your question, because I'm trying to think like how do I
Yeah.
select that CRO? It's a very involved process, and many the small biotechs with no experience struggle with it the most, because
Hmm.
they have limited resources and they look at money as the only indicator. Who's going to charge me the least? But then maybe they're placing people, the one who's charging the least may not have the right workforce, or maybe their workforce is located in a different time zone than the sponsor is and the sites are, and then you're kind of struggling always to
Hmm.
wake somebody up at midnight, their midnight, and feel so bad waking them up at 3 a.m. at night while the issue is ongoing here during the daytime in working hours.
Hmm.
So it's a complex decision for smaller companies, especially the startup biotechs.
Sure. Now, if you think about just smaller biotechs and pharma companies, medium, large size, kind of are there kind of unique challenges that you see depending on the size of the company? And I assume the larger ones may have more in-house capability than some of the medium to small size.
Yes, and the larger companies also have more latitude with because they have bigger, hopefully, usually
Budget.
more funding. Sometimes they
Mhm.
have limited funding for maybe a particular study, but they do have um, teams with that right experience. So they have a regulatory team that has been doing it for 30 years, 40 years, who've developed that capability, and pharmacovigilance team, and a medical monitoring team, and a data management oversight team, and contracts team. So they have all these different departments that have gathered so much experience in conducting clinical trials. So they all when they come together, they bring all those experiences together.
Mm.
So that's the advantage, plus larger budgets, um, and um, and then having more control over CROs because of these larger budgets and larger portfolio of studies that CROs have learned the processes of the sponsor, and sponsors have also learned along the way how those CROs work, because usually larger companies, if they don't have in-house capabilities to do all the services, they have some in-house, maybe, but they may outsource a few services. They've learned along the way how to work with those vendors, who the right people are, who are the decision makers, how
Sure.
they can get things done. But the
Sure.
disadvantage of larger companies, they are not as agile as a small biotech might be because they have large teams. Each person, each team is working on 30, 40, 50 studies.
Mm,
And who defines, how do you define your priority on a daily basis? And working in a larger companies, I've noticed it's also a lot of interpersonal relationship goes in to getting your protocol completed or your contracts reviewed or your budget reviewed by the contracts team and budget teams. And, so you're kind of working with so many different names and individuals and departments. And you have to know the complex structure of your functional team conducting the trial because they have their own limitations as well. They have finite number of hours on a daily basis, so they're kind of helping
mm,
you the best way they can. Small biotechs move fast, make decision fast. Although they have limited budgets, they don't have as much sway with the CROs, especially the larger the CRO, the less sway you get.
mm,
Um, and you don't have experience with the CRO that you're working with yet, because you're just doing your first or second study with them. So it takes time to develop that relationship and experience with the team you're working with, the vendors you're working with. But you don't have complex structures. It's, if I'm making a decision, all the next person I go to is the CEO or the CMO, because I
mm,
work with small biotechs. If there's a team of 5, how many people I need to ask for to get an approval? Either it's approved or
yeah,
rejected very quickly, and I can move on to a different, priority.
mm. Yeah, it's
So
quite
it's
fascinating.
both. Yeah, it is. It depends. Smaller companies are great in moving science fast. Large companies are great in doing things with experience because they have teams who have done it many, many
Mm.
times.
Yeah, and it sounds like there, one should strive to kind of find that right balance.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And CROs are now, many large CROs have biotech uh, uh, groups who support biotech companies because what works for a pharma or a large pharma doesn't work for a team of
But
2 because you don't
yeah,
have a
yeah,
counterpart in data management and counterpart in stats. All
mm-hmm,
you have is 2, 3, 4 people in operations and kind of coordinating everything with them.
mm,
So they
mm,
are, I find that the larger the CRO is, the harder it gets for them. As much as they say we are biotech friendly, it's harder for them to adjust with the small company structure. I personally like working with small CROs as a small biotech because
mm.
smaller CROs also have more agile, more flexible
Yes.
structures, and they tend to work with smaller companies. So they have experience working with smaller teams, limited resources, quick decision making, a lot of accountability, a lot of hands-on
Mm,
interaction, and very close oversight.
mm. And this is something we've noticed. We work with clients in biotech and pharma, and some things we notice too oftentimes is, especially on the finance side, when kind of dealing with budgets across a portfolio, across trials, is sometimes you have to pull the cord on a project that isn't trending well, right? And one of the things we
Yeah.
noticed, we were talking with the CFO of a biotech
Uh-huh.
recently. One of the things he mentioned was it's important to know which ones are your losers and which ones might be your winners, right? And
True.
kind of having the ability to pull the plug and fail fast,
Absolutely.
right? And kind of
Absolutely.
push your chips into what you think might be the winners, right? And there's a lot of kind of modeling that goes on behind the scenes with how much CROs are costing, and it sounds like that could potentially be one of the deciding factors. Also, what may be successful, what may not be.
Absolutely. And without giving names of the organization, I had this experience. The study was very promising. It would meet unmet need in a vulnerable, very sick patient population. Unfortunately, the CRO claimed they could do more than they had ability to.
Mm,
And the people they assigned could do a good job in a different indication, but could not do a good job in the indication they were assigned to. They presented an amazing bid and they got selected, but they did not have bandwidth and capacity to do the study the way it's supposed to do. Um, and it cost us a lot. And then we decided to just part ways with the CRO. And eventually, in that case, like we were able, because we needed data for a limited number of subjects, in that case, we assigned that study to a smaller CRO, very small CRO,
mm,
that came in, took over the study very quickly, and were able to meet our goals, enrollment goals, whatever we
wow.
provided to them. So yes, you're right. We constantly evaluate and decide. Sometimes what seemed really practical at the time you're signing contract with the CRO is not the best decision because you may start with a great team. So the people who are presented at the time of bid may not stay with the CRO too long, or they're pulled because they're doing such a great job with this small biotech.
Mm,
Sometimes they're pulled into more important project, but that CRO assigned to a different client, or maybe the team request a reassignment because of their own personal priorities and things have changed in their life. They get promoted. Sometimes they get promoted, so there are good
mm,
reasons. You lose people that know how to do things, and then you get new individuals who just don't understand what is needed. So on the CRO
how,
end, to be fair, yeah, I've seen um, program fail as well from the CRO end because they just are not able to staff the way they
mm,
and there are many reasons why they can't, but that's not scope of our
sure.
conversation today. But they cannot staff the study the way it's supposed to for success.
How often do these CROs get pulled, reassigned? You find another one. Like, is that kind of business as usual, or is that kind of more of a rarity?
It is not very rare, but it's more, it's less common, I should say. Happens. You start with all your good intentions, and then key people leave from the CRO. There was one time CRO lost their key leadership, and
Mm,
suddenly, then there was a good reason, but they just lost them. And as a sponsor, I had to pivot very quickly and take over the study myself and do the study myself in that country
wow.
and find a person there and re-strategize how I wanted to conduct the study. So it can happen. Bad things can happen to anyone with any organization. So in my role is I can try to prevent as much as I can, but life happens, things happen that you've never anticipated, and my role is to anticipate risks, as many risks as I can, and then if new risk comes that I have not anticipated and planned for, quickly assess and plan how I'm going to um, manage those risks as quickly as possible without impacting the timelines, budget, and find a different strategy, maybe change
Mm,
direction, and making sure that the whole leadership and the team is aware of why we are making decisions the way we are making.
mm. All right. So last question as we wrap up here. I know we've dived into several different areas. I
Hmm.
usually like to leave the audience with like if there was one piece of advice you would give to anyone looking to enter this space, what would you say for anyone trying to break in?
Oh wow, that's the most. it's, I wish I can tell you the answer one way. Um, if you're becoming a nurse or a doctor or an accountant or an IT professional, you learn the skills necessary. You're becoming a surgeon, you learn to be a surgeon. You're becoming a nurse, you learn get licensed to be a nurse. But coming to this industry is not straightforward. It's not something that is available to people. It's not even shared very openly by those who are in the industry. Um, so young people are not mentored as to find their way into the, because we talked about early when the first question was
Hmm.
networking and some, but most people say accidentally found my way in.
Mm.
Or they started very junior somewhere and then they moved up. So uh, my advice to individuals who are trying to move in, it's not your educational background in operations. At least I can speak to what I do. It's not just your educational background that's going to help you get the job, because this is the most common frustration. I'm a physician, I'm a nurse practitioner, I'm a PharmD. Why can't I get this job? Why can't I be a medical monitor? Why can't I be a director? Sometimes I get calls from individuals. I have so much experience as a nurse practitioner or as a physician. I'm renowned in my field. I worked as an investigator in 5 studies, 10 studies. Why can't I be? And my advice to them is you have to start somewhere, and it would not be leading a whole team, because it requires, it's a very experiential, it's a field where you need experience, hands-on experience. There is no way around it. And I've seen really great individuals fail miserably because they moved up really quickly, skipped all sorts of steps,
Mm.
and now in charge of a program, and a program fails miserably because that person had no prior experience, um, maybe oversold themselves, and their experience magnified it and said, oh, I know this, I know this, I know this, I can do it.
Mm.
And because of their credentials, they get the job, and they start and um, they don't know how to do the job well.
Mm.
So and they then they are disheartened, they feel like they failed. So my advice to individuals who are getting in is to get your foot in the door. People will discover you if you're great. I've found people with no experience and now they're leading teams. It took them a while because
Mm.
that's how it should be. Should not be like last year I started, now I'm director of ops at a biotech company. It's not going to happen, or it might happen, but to detriment to the project. And over at the CRO side, when I've seen inexperienced individuals leading teams from biotech side, not being able to answer questions, leading the team in a completely different direction, focusing on things that are not important, and micromanaging projects. Um, so advice is network. Make sure you are looking at the jobs at the starting level. Um, don't spend
And
a lot of money getting certificate courses. Personally, my experience has been when you do all these certificate courses without any experience, it doesn't make any sense. I can do GCP training without any clinical trial background. It might make sense then, but 6 months later, I will forget.
mm.
So, huh, and then be able to find the right jobs. So know the key terms. Uh, there are many good CROs that take individuals with the right credentials, like nursing background, PharmD, medical background, and give them training, and then slowly move them up the career ladder. Look at those options as well. But this is a really not the right time in the market. It's like so many layoffs, so many individuals looking for jobs. So don't lose heart, don't lose hope. Continue to look, continue to network, continue to ask people for their advice.
It sounds like it's long, be in it for the long ride, right? Not
Yes,
just a
yes,
short, quick win.
exactly,
It
exactly.
sounds like there's no shortcuts.
In my opinion, no. And you could be lucky, and you could be exceptionally talented and learn very quickly. But personally, I found It's a learning process. As I said earlier, when we started, I'm still learning. Every day there is a new regulation out, or one country does things differently, or there is new guidance available, and now I have to learn those guidance. And it's a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. But because it has to evolve. And the biggest part is technology is changing every day. So the tools that worked when I started, it was everything was paper CRFs, and I would go in full pages case report forms with the patient data and then FedEx it to my data management team, who would do double data entry and then write queries on paper and then mail paper queries to site. And then I would go to the site and nothing happened until I visited a site to pull pages. Versus now everything is available. As soon as data is entered, it's there for you to see. And more innovation is coming out. AI is there. It's so much is evolving. So keeping up with the industry is like you're always learning. You feel like you don't know enough.
I feel like you've triggered so many more questions for me, but I feel like we'll have to save it for a part two. Really appreciate
Absolutely.
your really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and experiences with us. And I hope the audience, got something valuable out of it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Okay.